the Ad Podcast, and we've got some great guests for you guys today. Aaron and Samantha Edwards are sibling entrepreneur duos based in New York City, and I just found out in Indiana, just outside of Chicago. Best known as the founders of the Charles Group, a premier strategy-first creative agency. Founded in 2010, the Charles Group has grown into an award-winning agency with offices in New York, Chicago, and London. The agency is known for its focus on high-end luxury, lifestyle, and financial services brands, including Cartier, St. Regis, HP, Boston Consulting Group, and Estée Lauder. The siblings share a brand performance philosophy, a term coined by Aaron to describe the fusion of high-level brand strategy with performance accountability. Under their leadership, the agency has won several Cannes Lion, Webby, and D&AD Pencils, notable for Cocainenomics campaign of Wall Street Journal and Netflix. The firm has also been featured in Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies 5 different times. Aaron brings an analytical and financial rigor to the creative world. Originally from Manchester, UK, he began his career as an analyst at Barclays and worked as a commodities trader in London. As CEO, he leads the agency's business strategy, financial modeling, growth initiatives, and is a limited partner at First Close Partners, where he invests in venture capital firms led by underrepresented managers. He serves on the board of advisors for Pace University, Lubin School of Business, and is a frequent guest lecturer at Columbia Business School and NYU. Samantha is co-founder and chief creative officer. She is the creative engine between the duo, focusing on narrative, design, and science storytelling. A designer by training, she began her career at GQ magazine in London. Her frustration with sameness of the traditional agency landscape led her to propose the idea of starting her own firm. As chief creative officer, she oversees the visual identity, creative direction for all agency clients, known for her rebellious approach to creativity, prioritizing deep narrative and emotional resonance over generic digital trends. She has been featured by Girl Boss and other publications as a leader who successfully navigates the challenge of running a family-run business and in a competitive New York City and global agency scene. Aaron, Samantha, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate getting to know you guys, learn a little bit about your story.
Thank you, Dylan. Nice. I like that intro.
Let's go. So let's start off. I always like for people to kind of understand a little bit of the history behind the agency. Agencies are ultimately, at the end of the day, people. I think this is a first in 345 episodes. I've never interviewed founders that were also siblings. Well, I think actually maybe once, but that was more in like a traditional, in a brand versus in an agency. So tell me a little bit about yourselves. Where did you guys grow up? Where did you guys go to school? And it sounds like you guys kind of went in different directions. Aaron more in the finance world, kind of that industry life, and Samantha, you in creativity and publishing. And then when did you guys kind of come back and come up with this idea of launching an agency together?
I'll let Sam go because I'm always talking about this. So.
I actually just I slacked you and said, you take this one because your story is so you tell it so eloquently as.
I just think it's time for a different.
All right, let's go. We're getting Samantha's POV this week today.
Yeah, come on.
My warts and all POV. Okay, so I originally went to school for design in Manchester. I went to Salford University. When I was in London and I was at GQ magazine as an editorial designer, I said, editorial design isn't all it's cracked up to be. I thought I was going to be doing a lot more. And granted, I was a junior. So when I went back to university, I said to my tutor, I think I'm going to go to New York. He's like, why? Why New York? That's crazy. I was like, I think there's something out there for me. I think there's big business in America. I think American advertising is interesting and cool, and I'd like to try. And so it was just after 9/11. I think it was 2002. I moved to New York City. Got an internship at a small design agency. They were actually thinking of closing the office at the time. It was in San Francisco. Everything had dropped off after 9/11, and they just literally needed somebody to answer the phones. And so I was there answering the phones, working on small stuff, small projects here and there. while they were, I guess, winding down the office. It turns out we got 2 or 3 new projects. They were just small. One was, I think, for a large healthcare nursing agency. The other one was Toto USA. And there was me and a copywriter, and we were working on the Toto USA account. I said, I think that we can, do more than just copywriting for this client. I think there's more to it. And because my bosses at the time, they were spending a lot of time in San Francisco, me and the account and the copywriter put together a pitch for Toto USA. We sent it, and lo and behold, we got into like the final 2 or 3. So when the boss, because there was no one there to manage the creative, the account, and the copywriter, they were kind of pissed, to be honest with you. I guess that's because they were winding things down, not winding up. Fresh out of school, you think you can win everything, right? And so we ended up winning, and that set the trajectory for my career at that agency. I'd always worked freelance work, and so I was doing that at the same time and hustling in New York. I'd say to Erin, why don't you come here? Why don't you come here? It would be so great if you came here. Erin and I have always had plans to work together. Erin, I'll let you tell the story of the bar. But
I love that.
We had essentially wanted to open a bar together. Erin's obviously an excellent businessman. Nobody, I think we're so ambitious, right? Nobody's going to give a guy a liquor license at what, we 18 as to open a bar? Well, those limitations weren't there for us. Like, we were like, yeah, we could do this. That was back in Manchester. So we always knew that we were going to work together in some way. And I'll let Erin tell his part about his journey to New York and then how we converged.
I love it. Let's go.
Yes. You know what? I love that. I absolutely love that story of the bar. I mean, yeah, I think we come from like very entrepreneurial parents. I think that is probably what has made us the way that we are. Our parents always kind of instilled the idea that you could do anything and should do everything that you can. And I think my dad, he never had a stable 9-to-5 job. He was always doing something. If he wasn't riding taxis, he was on building sites. If he wasn't on building sites, he was selling some insurance.
We used to have a sandwich shop in Manchester.
Yeah.
Erin you were really young at the time, but our parents bought a sandwich shop from old owners, and they had no business like knowing about a sandwich shop, but they ran the sandwich shop really well. There was a famous nightclub next door to it in Manchester called the Gallery, and so the entrepreneurs and my parents, they said, well, this sandwich shop only has office worker traffic from, I think, the morning, right? Everyone's buying the egg and bacon butties, and then the afternoon, and then things kind of peel off at like 2:00. So they ended up opening, selling Caribbean food for the nightclub next door. So people would go to the nightclub, and then they'd come to the sandwich shop after and get patties and rice and curry goat and all that. So again, that entrepreneurial spirit was always there, right? Who opens a sandwich shop and then it's like, nightclub next door, let's do a takeout at night. So it just goes to show.
I love that. And is that your heritage? Is that where your parents were from the Caribbean?
Yeah, originally. They both moved to England. I think mum was 14, dad was 4.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, so I think immigrant parents, first generation British, you just have, I think, another level of hustle in relation to others. And so I saw finance as the trajectory to be able to eventually retire at 35. A hospitality business. That was the goal. I was like, if I do this for like 18 years, I reckon by the time I'm 36, I'll be out of it. I would have made XYZ money. And obviously that never happened. First year after a drawing financial crisis hit, the entire prop desk that I was with was fired. People got demoted. Analysts became risk analysts versus risk takers. And so the market wasn't there. And then obviously you've worked your ass off to get to this incredibly privileged place of being called an investment banker, and then you get a $0 bonus for 4 or 5 years, and you start working 13, 14, 15-hour days. It's like, yeah, this is not the one. So I actually told my boss the year I was trying to move out to New York that was close to happening, and something happened and it didn't end up happening. And I said, if it doesn't happen by this time next year, which is my birthday, I'm going to quit. And I don't think she took me seriously. And it got to that date, that exact day, which was one day before my birthday, and I quit.
Wow.
And she was like, I can't believe you're actually leaving. I was like, well, look, this is it. So I got a 6-month gardening leave, which was incredible. And I got to basically, oh my God, it was amazing. I just got to like dick around for 6 months. It's called Cafe 1001 in Brick Lane. And I would sit and drink coffee and just watch people and write. And it was like such an amazing time to just like not have to worry about salary or money, but the ability to think about what the future of what I wanted to do next was. I love the show Entourage. So I was like, I want to get into the talent business. I think I could be Starry Gold. He looks like a cool dude. So
that's funny. And I like my favorite. Well, me and Samantha were rapping about TV shows before you popped on, and one of my favorite shows right now is Industry, which is about finance in London. And then Samantha, I don't. Oh, there you go. You're back.
I love Industry so much. Aaron can't watch it. He says it gives him PTSD.
I genuinely cannot watch it. I sit there and I just die watching it, because that was a lot of my experience.
Yeah. Well, I always say, the best business development job or the best sales job obviously is in finance, but you got to wear a tie and kind of, deal with all that stuff that you're talking about. And probably the next best is in the advertising and the marketing world. But, we don't have to wear suits. We don't have to take each other so seriously. And, it's still hard work, but you get at least some semblance of a quality of life.
Yeah, exactly. So that was it. Moved to New York, wrote the business plan in this cafe, was like, had like 10K or 20K saved up. I was like, right, gonna move to New York, moved in with Sam, bought myself an iMac, and, just started basically building out like a crazy financial model. And I never forget this. Sam came in and was like, dude, you've been building this spreadsheet about sales and your like entire vision for this company, and yet you haven't been outside once in like 3 weeks. Like, you're not going to build the business in the spreadsheet. You're going to have to get out there. And I never forget, I went to this networking event, and I was dying. I was like, what am I doing here?
Networking events. God, that was how you used to have to do it. You used to have to do it through network.
There was no LinkedIn outreach and automated sequencing. It was, hey,
roll up your sleeves and get out there and pound the pavement, Cooper Sterling style, right?
That was it. I used to sit in the hotel lobby bar after this networking event and basically got to know the maitre d' and the staff and the bartenders, and they would then, introduce me to people that were just there. And hotel lobbies were great because there's so many people working in business navigating through those areas, and especially in the evening time, they're always looking to wind down, hang out. So that's basically how we got started, was going out, meeting people, and then it's like you meet somebody, they need a little project, and then I come back and be like, I met this person, Sam, I think we could get a website, and she'd be like, yeah, great, cool, let me know when the money lands.
I love it. So Sam, were you still freelancing? Were you still working when you kind of turned to stand up the agency?
Yeah, that time I had taken, so I'd left the previous agency that I'd been at, freelance still. I've always freelanced. I've always done that. And I was at another agency. Interestingly enough, they were like I'd say below the line agency in Russia. And a friend
Wow.
of mine had recently been tasked with opening up the New York office. And so she reached out to me. She was like, I think I've got a role for you. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Russian agency, who are the clients? But the clients were pretty decent, and they were big global brands. So I was like, I'll take this and I'll take the role of creative director. Why not? So I was finally, because any creative will tell you, you don't just get into money right away. Some people do, right? But for the most part, when I started, you come up, you work for free, you work for pennies, you work for a little bit more, but it's all about the creative, right? So it doesn't really matter. But I was reaching a point where I was like, when am I going to start making money? And this opportunity came along. I was like, yes, I'll do it. And I remember at the time, I think I was working on a Smirnoff campaign. Was it Smirnoff? No, oh my God, it was Absolute. And I'd always wanted to do spirits. And Aaron was really taking off with the Charles. I said, you know what? I can do both. I think I can do both. While the Charles can't afford to pay me what I need to be paid or would like, because I'm making money, I'll freelance on the Charles and I'll do this on the side. And Aaron said to me, oh, but you've got to make the decision. Like, we can't do this. You can't be creative director at this other agency and then chief creative officer at the Charles. Like, it doesn't work like that. But in my mind, I was like, well, the paycheck, like, how? I don't know if I'm ready to. I've just started enjoying, looking at my bank account. Like, I'm just enjoying it. Like, and then I'm gonna go back to startup pennies. So, we negotiated, we agreed. Like, I was always gonna do it, but at that time, the money was just like,
yeah, it was kind of like you knew you guys wanted to be in business together, but there's like that line of like, okay, like when we have enough money to do X, then X, Y happens, and sometimes that line's hard to figure out, right?
Yeah. And then it was also like, it was a leap of faith, right? Like, if you think about it, Aaron had no prior experience in advertising, marketing, design, right? I had a network, but the net of freelance clients, but that network, and honestly, was primarily in music, DJs, artists, that kind of stuff. So they weren't really brands. So we'd have to literally be starting from scratch. And in my head as well, it was a very difficult. I remember saying to my boyfriend, now husband at the time, like, man, we just got Absolute, but I don't think I'm going to be able to stay on and do this, right? Because we've got the Charles, and it's like these two awesome opportunities hitting at just the same time. Obviously, the Charles went out, but yeah.
I love that. So, when did you guys kind of establish yourself as a luxury agency from the beginning, or was that something that kind of happened over time? And then, Samantha, like thinking about, like I know Russians get a lot of bad rap these days, but like truly, if you think, I know I have some friends that opened up Eastern European offices for the big holdcos. And one of the things about Russian culture is everything is about luxury, right? It's like Ferrari, Absolute, like Louis Vuitton. It's like that. They're like, Russian lifestyle is about aspiration to that like luxury, point of view. So I wonder, like, how did you guys fall into the lane of high-end finance, hospitality, and also at like the top tier of the market?
I think there's quite a few answers for that. The first, I'll go back to creative. I think our aesthetic has always been very high end. I think everything that we've always done, even when we were doing websites for DJs and artists, we always took a high end aesthetic approach. For me, it didn't matter what kind of brand or person you were, and I'd always taken that approach on throughout my career. Like, going back to Toto, yes, it was faucets, but I treated faucets, and I remember the first shoot that I ever did, I wanted to shoot it like luxury jewelry. They were faucets.
I love that.
Like jewelry, like people are paying top tier dollar for these faucets and shower heads. So I think it's important. Let's do it. So I think we'd always had that aesthetic, and it naturally, I think, attracted people, right? When we started working with Bloomberg Media, sorry, they really liked our aesthetic because I think we had that cultural vibe, right? It was different, it was vibrant, it was colorful, it was, something really interesting to look at, as opposed to your standard startup techie brand approach that I think they had seen a lot of. So I just think visually we offer something different. I think strategically we think differently. Being from England, we respect heritage and history a lot, and I think that's important to a lot of prestige brands too.
Yeah, like the fact that they've been around for 300 years, and
Exactly.
the history of how the product has survived things like World War II, and all these, like it's rooted in history, and really, like, people sometimes. A lot of people say, like, oh man, these challenger brands, they have such a leg up on traditional brands because they have like these like energetic founders who can kind of go on social media and turn into influencers. And to some degree that's true, but then what legacy brands have is they have a history to tell, and they have that founder story. Maybe the founder isn't around to put on TikTok anymore, but they still have a founder story, right?
Exactly.
So, I love that. Erin, you coined the term brand performance as you kind of think about the idea of high-level brand strategy married to performance accountability. Do you want to talk about a little bit more about that? Because obviously, brands, I think today understand that they have to invest in brand, and brand drives performance, but sometimes they have a hard time justifying, investing in the part that's less measurable.
Yeah, so my entire thesis for the advertising business was that, and I remember going to a July 4th party with a bunch of ad execs, and they tore me a new one when I said this. I said, I don't get how large global advertising holding models have all of these legacy traditional agencies under this umbrella that can't do any of the work that digital agencies are doing. And I was like, I think in 3 years' time, JWT is going to be dead. And in 2012, and I got laughed because 3 people in the room worked for JWT. I got laughed at. They were like, you are ridiculous. You know nothing about this business. You don't know your head from your ass. Shut up. And obviously 5 years later, 6 years later, that business went into the toilet. And so my theory has always been, how do you get to showcase the value of what you do? Now, there is intrinsic value that comes with work that isn't always measurable, but you have to be able to speak to what the intrinsic value is, right? And there are obviously tangible results that you can get that are more specific to performance marketing. So I was like, this idea of like intrinsic value that you can bring on the brand side, and this like output value that you can give on the performance side, there's got to be something that marries the two together. And so in my mind, you have to try, number one, the first thing that any agency or company that tries to adopt this model needs to understand is that you have to understand the business, and you have to understand it as well, if not better, than the actual marketing people at the brand. Because you can't really justify any of the things that you're doing because it's not tied back to any business objective. So this is where I think our model is very different, in that it's a very consultative approach to say, what is it that this business is? Is it a B2B company? Is it B2C? How does it work? How do you make money? How do you scale? How do you not scale? How do you create margin? These are all finance questions, right? These are all business related questions. But if the clients can't answer those questions, then the question becomes, well, how can then we tie what we're doing to any value, and the value change of changing anything that we have as a business objective, right? Or getting to the goal. So it's just a very different way of approaching the relationship and the conversation. And I think that's why we've been so successful with a lot of the companies that we work with, is we're not interested in the marketing idea or the brand concept or brand strategy or even the performance marketing data. We're interested in what is this business and how do we move the needle, and how do we understand it in a way that you will understand it through what we do.
Love it.
That core concept there.
Sam, one of the campaigns that really put you guys on the map is Cocainenomics with Wall Street Journal and Netflix. Be curious to hear your story as the creative, obviously, behind that campaign. How did it come about? What was the insight? And why do you think it landed in such an amazing way?
So we had worked with Dave Lennon, who was the creative director at the time at Bloomberg Media. We'd worked with him at Bloomberg Media. He had then moved to Wall Street Journal Custom Studios and was working with his team. They had, I think at the time, brand sponsored content was really big, but it was the classic image, text. And he had been working with his team because he wanted to pitch Netflix. They had the opportunity to pitch Netflix for this cocaine. It was a story about Pablo Escobar and the cocaine business, right? And they'd been pitching previously and not won. And I think it was because they didn't really have the name for, creativity. It was a branded content studio. So he brought us in. I think he brought us in at like 12 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon and said, we've got this pitch on Thursday. Here's what I'm thinking. What can you do? By 6 o'clock, we had creative for him. And it was really great because I think we weren't thinking through the lens of, gosh, it's the Wall Street Journal and this is their kind of readership and this is what it should look like. We're thinking, what would we be interested in? How could we make this interesting? And so we knew that we wanted to do a level of interactivity. But when you're thinking about Pablo Escobar and telling the story of the drug trade, obviously it makes sense to have the cocaine be interactive. So we were like, okay, somebody lands on the page because WebGL was big at the time. And so we'd been playing around with WebGL on our own site. And this felt like the perfect opportunity to have something that kept people on the page, which we knew was important, right, as a metric. And just be interesting, something cool for us as well. And so 6 o'clock, we went back. He approved the artwork, minor changes. And what's really interesting, Dylan, is when I look at the rough mock and comp that we did, not much changed from actually live into production. It was just one of those, okay, the design is good, the ideas are good. I think even we got to work with the editorial team because a lot of the graphics were custom to what was actually being written about, like a very illustration, editorial, photography. How do we integrate the brand content and make it all work? It was super collaborative. And so, yeah, that was, I think that shows in the work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And very, very edgy for a conservative brand like the Wall Street Journal, too, right?
Yeah. That's, and after that, we did several projects after that where we were just kind of given carte blanche to be like, okay, how would you make this interesting? How would you do this?
And I think going back to what I was saying about the results piece, yes, we won all the awards, but the business they went from 20 to $80 million on a custom studio division that was flailing. And Rupert Murdoch come down to the actual floor to ask who was doing the work and who is this new team that was generating all this buzz around custom content. And that set the mandate for Dow Jones, the much larger parent company, to then become a humongous content studio that would adapt all of the work that we were doing in the Wall Street Journal. So again, going back to that idea of how I drive in business, this was an ad sales team selling custom content to brands in a completely new dimension, interactive digital experiences, long form storytelling. New York Times were doing it, but they did one thing. These guys built the model to do everything constantly. So that's a really like big claim to fame of being like the branded sponsored content kids. But, you know, I think those are the kind of things that, you know, we look back at and we're like, wow, that was incredible what we were able to do in such a short space of time.
Yeah. And like you said, you know, now that's the standard at any publisher, is like the holy grail is how do we create something that is integrated with a brand that they can't skip and maybe has an opportunity to ladder up to, you know, places like Netflix or Hulu. And, you know, you look at some of these shows like F1 Drive to Survive, or, you know, the show on Netflix about the LIV tour and golf. You know, like people are hungry for this branded content if it's good, and it allows the brand to actually sometimes recoup their marketing budgets and actually make money. And they've got an evergreen asset, and it's content that people want to see versus content that they want to skip. So I think it's pretty awesome that you guys were at the ground floor, especially with Wall Street Journal and Dow and really the industry at large, as they were kind of moving to this model of sponsored content. Aaron, I know you're an LP. We talked about it at First Close Partners, where you invest in VC firms that are led by underrepresented managers. How important is that, you know, been to your experience coming up in finance? Samantha, maybe yours as well in the creative agency, you know, working with talent, founders, people in business that are from these underrepresented communities.
Yeah, I'd say what's the most fascinating statistic, and I don't have the latest data, so this was in 25 or 24, but underrepresented managers accounted for something like 30 or 40% of the alpha venture capital produced, meaning they outperform by a significant amount of their peers in that are not considered ethnic, right? And the reason why First Close exists is because the founder saw that gap. He was like, wow, these companies that, you know, come with diverse managers are really crushing it, and there's no one available. There doesn't seem like there's the right type of institutional capital going to these funds. So that idea of like taking uncovered or undiscovered groups and people
I'm sorry, I don't know. Are you hearing that, Dylan?
Aaron, your audio is coming through a little glitchy, but I think that was the first time. I think it's fine now.
Okay.
But I'll check the back end. I'll throw the next question to you, Samantha, while I QA that on the back end. But you've been featured by Girl Boss and other publications as a leader who's successfully navigated the challenge of building a family-run business in the competitive New York City advertising agency scene. You know, we talked a little bit about it in the outset, that you guys kind of always knew that you were going to have a business together, whether it was a bar or an advertising agency. You knew you would work together someday. I'd love to hear just a little bit of the backstory behind, like, you know, when you guys grew up. Sounds like there's a little bit of an age difference. What was your dynamic like as siblings growing up? And then did that ever come across your mind that, like, oh my gosh, like, you know, coming together professionally, that does create a dynamic that we're going to have to manage, that, you know, is going to infiltrate our personal relationships one way or the other, whether we like it or not. Of course, we'll be successful, but if for some reason that we're not successful, could that ever affect our relationship as brother and sister? You know, be curious to get your take on that, Samantha.
You know, it's so funny because I think it's it's the one question people ask us a lot. Like, oh, I could never work with my brother or my sister. how do you guys get on? Don't you guys fight? In order to explain that, I think I should go to the beginning, right? Here we go. Our parents, the way they raised us to always stick together, right? I remember being 7 years old, and I say this to Aaron every birthday, but I remember the day he was born.
Wow.
How old was I? 5, 6? I remember the day that he was born, and right down to the light. I remember the day he came home. I've always remembered Aaron, right? And so even though we did fight when we were kids, our parents were like, you must love one another. They would always say that. Like, us fighting was actually the thing that would get us in trouble more so than the thing that we might have done, right?
Wow.
That was like unforgivable to fight. Fast forward to me being a teenager, I used to have to take Aaron everywhere with me. One, because our parents worked, but two, it was just what you did. You took your brother everywhere. And I'm hanging out with my friends, maybe doing things I shouldn't be doing. And Aaron had to come, and we'd be like, Aaron, go in the other room. Or Aaron, go over there. You know, we were together. We were together. And I think there's something in that. And it's funny. I said to my boys, they were both fighting like cats and dogs the other day, and I said, I caught myself saying, you must love one another. You must stick together. You only have each other. I was like, wow, that reminds me of what our mum and dad used to say. So I think we've always had that, like, are we going to disagree? Yes. Can we be mad with each other? 100%. Is it okay to be mad with each other and acknowledge that? Yes. But we can't harbor the bad vibes or the anger or the frustration, right? And we have had those moments. We still do. But I think what we've learned is you move on from it. I think some people harbor those, being frustrated with somebody else. They might hold on to it, and it doesn't do anyone any good, especially when you're in business together. Like, that's toxic. It'll spread really quickly, and it'll destroy the thing that you set out to build. So no, I think we've got a really good relationship, very honest, very open. Sometimes if I'm being what we say Negatroid, Aaron will be the optimist of like,
Negatron, the latest version.
And vice versa. But I think also because we're so used to being open and honest, and I think emotional intelligence is very important for us, right? With our employees, and I think we've been raised that way anyway, to think, what's the word I'm looking for? To think about why we're doing the things, or why you're saying the things that you're saying, or why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And we bring that to our business. And then we make sure, obviously, that we're having open and honest kind of conversations with each other. So that's why I think it works.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you guys kind of naturally gravitated to these very like unique skill sets that you need to run a business, right? Like, it seems like, Samantha, you came up through the creative kind of side of things, and you're very much the creative leader and the creative strategist. And Aaron, you came up obviously through the world of finance. So understanding how to actually run a business, hire employees, manage a P&L, execute a business plan. But probably the most important that you mentioned was sales, right? You got to get out there and bring home the bacon, bring in the opportunities and the strategies that you had, early days of like, I have a similar thing, your story about, becoming friends with the bellboys and the people at the hotels. Here in San Diego, I've developed a network at the high-end hotels of informants that basically tell me when, oh, hey, Dylan, Pepsi's going to be here for an offsite for 3 days. Like, you should probably reach out to their marketing team, not just the conferences, but like the smaller meetings that don't show up in the public, forum anywhere. So I love those like old school strategies of like, hey, that you had to do things a different way before all this AI automation and LinkedIn and, cold email and all that stuff came. And really, I think, I'd be curious to your perspective, Aaron, as the person who owns the business development side of the agency. My experience is the more AI becomes ubiquitous, the more people's inboxes get loaded up with spam, the more, LinkedIn is kind of like a place where you've got to navigate, a lot of like unsolicited outreach and, messaging. How important is the human, face-to-face of, running around New York City and doing things that put you in a position to meet interesting people that might become clients of the agency?
Yeah, I actually have been thinking a lot about this recently because we have all of these sophisticated outbounding tools and they generate zero results. And awareness tools, it's kind of like an ad that you run on an awareness side. You don't expect a conversion from it, but it might do something. I think it's primarily about the strength of your personal network. And the question becomes, what value do you add to your own network? Because there's probably 3 or 4 people in your network who can probably change the entire dynamic of everything that you're doing in business if they were just aware of what it is that you might be looking for, or they're aware that you're a credible resource. So in my mind, every interaction I have with anyone new, I'm open to anything, number one. It doesn't matter if it's a project, a freelance thing. Hey, I've got this idea. Can we grab a coffee? I will meet with you. Which means there's a lot of time spent doing a lot of things that technically on paper don't make sense because they don't add any technical value to the sales pipeline, but they do indirectly. And then the second piece is having the credibility, building the reputation about your standards and your values. And everybody that interacts with you knows that there's a level that you're operating at. And I think as I'm getting a bit older and a bit wiser to the game, that reputation is basically everything. And the amount of referrals that you get based on somebody saying, I don't know how good he is at digital marketing, but holy shit, the guy's transparent. He'll tell you everything. He's not gonna sell you on anything. He's gonna tell you. If he doesn't think he can do anything, he's gonna tell you. If he thinks you've got a shit business, he's gonna tell you. If he thinks you're tell you. But that is a big one. So, and then I think the final piece is the PR element that I absolutely hate with this industry of people going on stage doing talks that aren't doing any of the goddamn work. And it's in such esoteric, generic, vanilla ways. Sorry to go on a rant about that, but I think it's, being in the work and doing the work is the only way that you should, like, those are the only people that should be talking about the work. Right?
Yeah, it's a good point. There's a lot of stolen valor in our industry, right? Where,
so much.
Yeah, people who actually do the work don't get the credit, and especially don't get the stage time to talk about it. I think that's an important thing to note. And I agree with you. It's sad. Like before the last 3 weeks, I was at a conference every single week since the beginning of the year. I took spring break off, not really by choice, but it just was kind of quieter during spring break. And then I actually got in a good rhythm of just getting all my content that I had booked and bagged over the last couple of months pushed out. And, one of the things that I notice is, 90% of panels and conversations add no value because the clients give no permission for anybody to talk about things that actually matter. Mm-hmm. So if all you can do is talk about surface level things, and you can't talk about any insights because you're afraid of giving away trade secrets or show that maybe you made a mistake, or, like the one keynote that I keep coming back to that actually I thought was very impactful this year was Zach, the guy that launched the go-to-market for OpenAI and for ChatGPT. Like, I must have talked about that guy's talk, 20, 30 different times, because, one thing that I thought was really great that he did was he stopped the room and he said, hey, I'm insecure as a person, so can everybody put their phones down? Because if I see you looking at your phone, it's actually going to make me insecure, and I'm not going to be able to give you my best. So he wasn't like pompous and got up there like, everybody put down your phones because I have something important to say. He put it on himself first. He's like, I'm humbling myself. I'm being vulnerable. I'm expressing the idea to you that like, I need you to put down your phone because it's going to affect my performance and I'm insecure. And I was like, oh, everybody put down their phone. No problem. It was so cool. So I love that idea of like, just like setting the tone for the room. And then, being able to go into the story of like launching ChatGPT and OpenAI and like bringing that to the market. But the biggest insight for me was like, hey, we're in a moment where a lot of people are scared of a lot of things. AI taking their jobs, Terminator, World War III. We have to be storytellers that talk about things that are optimistic, and we need to bring people. We need to not prey on fear, but we need to lift people up with storytellers that make people excited and hopeful for the future. And I think that's something that has been sticking with me for most of the year. So I think you're right. I think you guys are right for sure. You got to tell uplifting stories. So Samantha, we've made it 46 minutes in without talking about AI, but I think Zach from ChatGPT, unfortunately, he's invoking him makes me have to ask the question. Last year's buzzword was AI. This year's buzzword was agentic. I wonder, in your side of the business and the creative side of the business, how much is AI a game changer? How much is it accelerating the work of the creativity that you bring to the actual work of the agency? Where do you see it having the most impact on a shop of your guys' scale and size and speciality?
Okay. Yes, it is a game changer, right? Less about the actual development of visuals. It's funny, 2 years ago, I can't believe it was 2 years ago, we were like, okay, why don't we do an AI first campaign? And this was with a beauty brand. And honestly, we ended up having to do the majority of the heavy lifting, the creative team, because the creative portion, the visual portion of AI just wasn't there. I'm sure from a prompting perspective as well, we weren't quite up to speed on how best to get the best out of the image generators. So we had a bad experience. We were like, we still have to keep using, we have to figure out how to integrate it into our process, more so from an efficiency perspective. I'm a big believer that we should always try new things. Like, I came from the print generation into digital, into social, into marketing. They're all connected and it's nothing to be afraid of. So I actually encourage our teams to use AI where they can. More often than not, we're using it in research, insights, strategy. The thing that I'm a big believer in is the team not just taking the first output and being like, that's it. You need that human input to get it where it needs to be. And sometimes it doesn't work at all, right? You read, this is absolute nonsense. It's better that we just do it manually. Forget it. So we do have those conversations a lot. I'd say from an efficiency perspective, it has made the team a lot more efficient, especially when it comes to the reporting or the data aggregation side of things. Like before, having to go through, okay, say we need to understand audiences, right? And we're trying to understand, okay, well, what is this audience actually interested in? What messages are going to resonate? How are we going to create creative that appeals to that audience? Having to read through 50 pages of a report was taxing, and you try getting a creative team to do that, they're not going to do it. Strategy will, but then strategy will come back with a 25-page deck. And it's still hard getting the creative team to pay attention. So now to be able to synthesize that and have that as a jump off point, it's really saved the team a lot of time. In addition, I think creative tool wise, they really are, looking at it more so from a concept. How do I get this concept? How do I have this concept visualized so I can show this to client and get sign off? But then also, how can I tweak what already exists almost in a post-production way to right? We've tried AI generated campaigns, and I'll be honest with you that you can tell.
Yeah, they don't have soul.
They're not there. You can see it. You can see it. It's so obvious. And I think even, I was reading something the other day that people don't interact with AI generated content on social platforms the way they do real deal human led content. Like there's something there, you can tell, scroll past it, it's slop, who cares? So I'd say from the creative side, very much so, it is a part of our process. I like to speak to the ops side of the biz, but and I think Erin was integral in really pushing us forward, right? In terms of how it's actually integrated into our process, workflows, and the business overall.
Erin, you want to speak a little bit to the ops side?
I mean, yeah, I'm working in it 6 hours a day. I went down the crazy rabbit hole of OpenClaw and all of the agentic systems and built my own infrastructure and all this crazy stuff. And I think there's 3 phases of AI. There's the wonderment and excitement phase, which I think most people are kind of in. There is the deep dive aha moment of, wow, I'm producing something incredible. And now you get overly excited about what you're building. You overbuild and you build a bunch of crap. And then there is the realization phase. That is I just built a bunch of stuff that has no value and no use case. And it's because I didn't ask the question, what is it that I want this thing to do? When you go through the full cycle, you start to recognize the idea that you as a human being have to have 3 really, really important understandings, like deep understandings of AI. The first is systems thinking and system design. If you can't think in a structured architectural way, forget it. You're just going to build crap. The next is kind of understanding kind of how the engineering piece works in terms of the different languages that you're using in terminal and bash commands, and like just having a grip of like what the basics of AI is. What is a token? How does that work? Why does it work? Why do I get garbage when I put this in? And then there's the whole privacy data piece where you're really needing to understand what is your RAG, retrieval strategy. How do you think about privacy of data? How do you not get into an absolute legal bomb by just uploading all your stuff to Anthropic and hoping that they delete it in 30 days because that's what their API covenant says, which we all know is nonsense.
Yeah. There's I remember like early, I had a conversation with somebody who's like, oh yeah, there's this amazing new AI, AI connections platform, and it's kind of like LinkedIn, but it automatically connects you with people, and and then so I'll check it out. I'm a fan of those types of tools. And then it's like, then it was like the old days of the internet where it's like upload your entire phone to, go to LinkedIn and download your entire connections and then upload it to this thing. And it's like, wait a minute, like, do I even know who these people are? What does it do? So I think I think people are like, a lot of these tools are almost like just vaporware for data collection, right? It's like, oh, like you got to give it a lot in order for it to give you the promise. And then how do you really know? So I think buyer beware, I think, is the important thought there. Well, awesome guys. Erin, Samantha, I've had a great time getting to know you both a little bit this morning. Love what you guys are building. Love the dynamic. I think about my daughters who are 10 and 12 and my son who's 3. And, the idea that, someday they're going to have to, take care of each other and be there for each other. And they all, all of them are child actors, and one is a social media creator and one does more campaign work, and they have a healthy competition. And then I always try and hey guys, you're a team, you're not yes, Tegan has more followers on Instagram, but Tenny, you work a little bit more and you get more bookings. So celebrate each other's strengths and each other's victories.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part they do, but congratulations to you and your relationship and your parents, instilling that in you guys. So kudos. And with that, if there's anything that you want to send the audience as far as where to connect with you and to keep up with your thinking, and most importantly, where they want to connect with the agency, where would you like to send folks?
Don't follow me on LinkedIn. Follow I'm sporadic. If you want to, you can, but you might get 3 posts a year. Erin's better at that. You can also go to our website, thecharlesgrp.com.
Yeah. You can follow me at aaroncharlesedwards.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn with the same link. And go to the Charles LinkedIn as well. I think there's some really great content on there, especially some of the recent stuff and some of the archival work. So just follow us across those places.
Love it. And for those of you who are watching at home, if you are seeing the show for the first time, don't forget to give us a follow or subscribe. And Erin, Samantha, I'll wish you a great day. Hope to get to meet you in person sometime.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thanks, Dylan.
All right. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.